Welcome to Why I Quit, a show that interviews people quitting their 9-to-5 jobs in search of something different. Listen to inspiring conversations where we dive deep into the stories of why people quit their jobs, what were the hardest parts, where are they now, and any advice for people following the same path. I am so excited to introduce Connor Lewis as this week's guest. Listen to Connor share his story of quickly changing career paths from accounting to video editing after he fell in love with filmmaking during college. During COVID, his role changed, and he started reevaluating his relationship with work. Learn how an honest conversation with his manager about his work needs led to shifting into a new role of making documentaries. Get inspired listening about his latest project, where he traveled the country making a documentary about the Great Resignation. Hey, Connor, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, happy to be here.
I want to start off by going back a little bit. Tell me about where you went to school.
I went to school at Northeastern University. If you can believe it, I went to school as an accountant. Quickly spent time in accounting and realized that working Saturdays and overtime and spreadsheets wasn't for me, and kind of dove into my avocation, which was filmmaking, and have been doing that ever since.
That transition, did that take place while you were at school, or did you start off with an accounting job and then know you wanted to switch from there?
I started off with an accounting job and knew I wanted to switch from there. But I did that within an internship, if that makes sense. So I kind of had dipped my foot in the water and then pivoted as fast as I could while still in school. But I'm still here with a business degree, which, still useful for filmmaking. Still got to figure out how to make the money.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into filmmaking and what that process was like for you.
Yeah, so I joined a club in college called NUTV, Northeastern University Television. I quickly fell in love with it. I made all of my friends through there. As most people do, I think they get into organizations and that becomes like their life in college. But it was very special to me because it felt like people could be very expressive through their script writing. It felt like people cared about social issues and they wrote about those. And I was just in classes that caring about the social issues and our feelings was secondary. And so I was enamored by it and fell into it quickly, became president of the club, and figured out what administration looked like in that sense, as well as how to teach newcomers and mentor people and set up that. And then I landed a tech job right after college that wanted to take a chance on what videos could look like in a marketing environment. I made my case, they hired me afterwards, and now I lead the department at that place called the Predictive Index. Yeah, and now that I guess the next transition is how do we make films as opposed to marketing videos, and how does that add value to business as well to the world as well as me as a creative?
So tell me a little bit about, from that job in the beginning, what's your typical day-to-day like? Are you going in the office? Are you doing a 9-to-5? And has that changed over the years for you as well? Totally changed. I used to go in every day. I used to film people every day. I would set up and break down sets almost every day. But then COVID hit. Then I was doing Zoom videos and editing Zoom videos for a while. That is drab. And I really did not like that for a long time. I was considering quitting my job, and I almost made the jump, except I told my workplace I was discontent by editing Zoom videos. And so they're like, okay, if you feel comfortable, we can send you traveling to do some like short documentaries. And I did this 3-minute documentary on being understood at work, how that affects your relationships at the home. And that really invigorated me again. I found out a cadence where I could work remote and show up when I was only needed to, like on set, both in the office and in these like traveling locations. And so I would say I comfortably work at home most of the time, but enjoy the benefits of a hybrid environment because I'm a rather extroverted human. And when you made that switch, did you know filming those types of documentaries was that the goal, and you knew that was what you wanted to get into, or did you get that assignment and then that really invigorated you moving forward? It was kind of an experiment for me because I think like many in the pandemic, I just had like a reckoning with what I was doing with my life. I think NPR said it best. They were talking on one of their podcasts and said motivation for quitting, and this resonates for me, wasn't just like financial or economical, but behavioral psychologists are increasingly likening people's pandemic experiences to different forms of
trauma. Like those experiences rewired my brain a little bit, and I didn't have social interaction. And so I started to get into social work and journalism. And I was like, maybe I would like to go back to grad school, but that's a classic mid-20s mistake. And so I was like, I'm going to dodge that. And so I was like, I love talking to people. I've been lacking that. So why don't I try to do something with my job that accesses that and make a business case for it? It was like a reckoning with my own identity, as well as an experiment with the interests that were taking place.
Now that you are on the road more, interacting with people more, do you think that fills the void a little bit of working from home and not having that face-to-face interaction in the office? Like, how does that compare for you?
Oh, it fills my cup. It totally fills my cup. I got obsessed with my projects this year, the ones where I had to travel, go to meet people, and build documentaries. I have never been obsessed with my job. And I don't know how sustainable it is. It was great for 2 months, but this feels like I'm in lockstep with my superpowers. It feels like I'm getting to do the things that I love. Yeah, it feels really good, Dave.
Tell me a little bit about the last documentary you did. I know it was focused on the Great Resignation, so I'd love to hear a background of where did this idea come from and how did it all come together?
Yeah, so I don't know about your social circles, Dave, but I imagine since you started this podcast, you notice that people are quitting more and more these days, and people are jumping ship from their jobs and they're changing careers. And I was just noticing that, talking to so many friends and even colleagues about their friends. And sure enough, when I did my research, I found this LinkedIn interview where the CEO was saying that he's noticing job transitions up 54% year over year in 2021. And the younger you go, Gen Z, for instance, the number is 80% year over year, millennials 50% year over year. The younger you are, the more people are jumping ship. So what the heck is that about? I just got so curious. And then as I started digging into the stories, I found out that people didn't even have a job lined up in some cases. They just wanted to get out. As someone who takes an interest in human psychology, I wanted to understand the deeper reasons underneath why people were leaving their jobs. There's definitely an economic reckoning, but I feel like there's more than just an economic reckoning currently. And so I got really curious about that. I pitched that we should do a documentary about it to work after a conversation I had with my mentor where he says, people are putting work on trial. I was like, work on trial? That's very catchy. I do feel like work is going on trial. And so I said to my company, we should be talking about this. We are a tech company that deals with people at work. It doesn't have to be about our product. It can just be about this cultural movement we're seeing. They give me the money to run with it. It's kind of a solo baby project. I hired like a composer and an animator and an art director, and we all just collaborated on this thing. And I traveled to 10 states in a month, interviewing people who I'd sourced. I found some experts, some individuals who were changing career jobs or their careers. And I found companies who were trying to hold on to their people and fix themselves and understand what people want out of their relationship with work, because that's what we're talking about in this documentary. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it and what I started to find.
I know one thing just with doing this podcast, I think something that's really amazed me is like how open, vulnerable, and willing people are to talk about this topic. I know sometimes it can be like super difficult. Did you find the same thing throughout your process?
Yeah, they want to be asked. People have a lot to say on this if you give them permission to speak about it. Certainly, it takes up a lot of their mental space. And so I just asked people one question, they'd talk for like 10 minutes. I was like, oh my goodness, like the dam has been lifted, And two, it's a media sensation, right? So you get the Great Resignation, which is true, by the way, that job quittings, whatever the phrase is, it's up higher than it has been in the past 20 years, according to the U.S. Labor Department. And you have Striketober, right? Like the Cornell Labor Action Tracker, a really cool tool, by the way. You should check it out. It basically tracks all of U.S. wage or labor strikes on a map. That the thing is like lit up all across the country, and it's at an all-time high as well. The individuals have the cultural context to give them the confidence to talk about these issues. And I think that's empowering. I think that's why people are quitting. I think that's why I got such good interview guests. I think that's what we're talking about right now.
What were some of the main themes that you saw resonating throughout all of the interviews that you were doing during the process?
I talked to 4 individuals who are making career changes, 3 companies who were trying to fix stuff, an industrial psychologist, a career coach, a diversity and inclusion expert, and a few others. And I visited all of them and presented this framework. I said, this is kind of where my head's at. This is what I'm hearing. What do you think? And all of them said that they really like it. And so the framework is that people are looking for, one, a sense of being in the workplace, like a better sense of themselves, of being themselves at the workplace. And two, a sense of belonging at the workplace. And if you can kind of imagine those as like the pillar words, and they kind of tree out to 3 individual words each. So I'll run through them super fast. And so under being, you have freedom. So people are looking for, quote, I have control over my schedule, my projects, and or my financial situation. 2, under being, they're looking for growth. So I'm self-actualizing in the ways I'd like, both in my career and my life. 3, there's purpose under being. So I'm in line with my superpowers. So my role is bred for me. It's like made for who I am. And also the company I'm working for is making the world a better place. So there's freedom, growth, and purpose. And then under belonging, you have things that are really starting to be talked about now, like equity. So there's opportunity and voice for someone like me at my company. Community. I'm surrounded by loving others who listen and care about me. That was, by the way, Dave, community, number one. I would say this is the thing I heard the most. Whenever I asked people who quit their jobs, what would have made you stayed? The first thing they told me every time is, if I was just listened to, I would have stayed. And so community is really about people who listen to you. And then lastly, safety. So I feel free to be myself and my health and stature are protected. That includes physical safety, of course, but also emotional safety. Can I cry in the workplace and will I be comforted? There's also things like psychological safety, which is a really hot topic right now. It has to do with failure. Can I fail at my job? Can I innovate? And intellectual safety, which is one I had never heard before, but my man, Kemi Joseph, introduced it in the documentary as understanding the plans that are laid out through the organization. So you can ask questions and poke holes, and you'll be ridiculed for asking questions about what you're about to do for the next 3 months. And so, so equity, community, and safety, that's all under belonging. And if you look at that framework, I'm hoping it gives people a language to talk about what they're looking for from their job. Like maybe you don't have access to the growth you want at your job. Maybe you feel stagnant and like there's no way for you to go up in skills. Or maybe you just don't feel listened to, like that sense of community is lacking. It's one thing for leaders to say like, oh, I just want it to feel more like family here, but I don't know how. And it's another thing when someone says, hey, your middle managers aren't listening to your employees. They aren't taking action on that. Why not? So anyway, that's all to say that those 6 things show up in the workplace and it's worth talking about.
No, I love how you broke it down, because I think something that's important is that too many times it's simplified or generalized of how it gets talked about, right? I either love my job or I don't. That's not really a accurate description, because, of those 6 things that you mentioned, you're never going to have 100% of all of them. And so I think part of it is like, how do you prioritize what's most valuable to you and like what percentage you have of each of those things?
That's exactly right. I don't think you can expect there's too much. You just have to figure out what you need from your relationship from work as an individual, which probably depends on what phase of life you're in, or perhaps what your family relationships are like and where you are. And then have conversations with yourself and with the people who you report to, the people, your colleagues, about how you can either get more of what you need of those 6 words out of the relationship with your current job, or if you need to move jobs, that can give you what you need. It's like a relationship with a friend, right? If neither side is benefiting from the relationship, if in this case we're talking about the employee, if the employee is not getting, let's say, the freedom of their schedule that they need, they're going to look for a job that gives them that freedom. They're not just going to stay because it's the right thing to do. It's a worker's market now, so you can jump ship and feel pretty safe in that.
And I think it's also important to note that those things can change over time. Like you said, like based on your situation in life. And, I think it's important to have that conversation with yourself and then also your manager that, hey, if that is changing for you of, whatever it is, if you'd rather be remote, if you'd rather be in the office, if you're looking for something else, like, being vocal about that, I feel like is, one of the most important missing pieces right now.
Totally. And frankly, not enough managers are asking these questions. Wouldn't it be so refreshing and I know it would be for many of my friends, if your manager just came into a one-on-one meeting with you and asked you what's important to you with your relationship with work. What is top of mind for you outside of work, and how does work affect that? Too often, I think we separate work and life, and if anything, we've been locked in our little Zoom cages for the past 2 years, and we are literally in people's homes. You are interviewing me in my bedroom right now. And how intimate is that, And how much of a metaphor is that for the fact that you cannot separate work and life, and the best managers will ask you about how your life is going and how work plays into that.
I want to go back to when you were talking about the community aspect. That's something that's fascinating to me because it's clearly something that's super important. I'm hearing that on my end as well. But as the workforce goes more remote, I find it harder to build community when you don't have as much face-to-face or in-person interaction. So do you have any thoughts, or did you see anything come up with that of like how to handle the want for community, but also in a digital, more remote world?
It's so hard to access community when you can't be with them in person, right? I can only speak to my own experience with this, and that speaks really true to me because I need community out of work. Otherwise, I feel alone, and I think a lot of people feel alone right now. And the way I do it is simply I have to make friends that are outside, that I will also talk to outside of work. They don't even necessarily have to live in my town or city. They're just people who I would like schedule a FaceTime with. Or here's one thing I do. I have 3 people whom I love at my workplace, and I schedule bi-weekly 30-minute coffee chats with them in my work time, in my 9 to 5, so that I can interrupt my day of work with someone that I love and feel that community. Another thing that my company does is we have biannual events. I know not every company can do this, but my company flies everyone up to Boston who feels safe to do so, and makes sure that we have those semi-annual events that solidify relationships and allow people to meet one another in person. Those are just 2 things that really stand out to me, because it really is on the individual to make community just as much as work. Work can set up systems and Zoom chats, and God knows we've been in breakout rooms where we're asked questions about what are our greatest aspirations for 2022, which are great, fine. But if I'm an individual who's not going to engage with those, then it doesn't matter that my workplace set those up. I have to take the initiative to find that community. And the same is true in personal life.
Has your thought process about work and your career changed at all during the process of making this documentary?
I think it's just clarified work's role in my life, and that it can't be everything. So for me personally, I guess I was really having trouble understanding where my purpose fit in at this workplace, because I was being asked to run a YouTube channel for my work. I was being asked to constantly churn out case studies, things that I would consider very detail-oriented and very process-oriented. And I always thought that maybe I wasn't the best person for the job, because I am someone who needs a pretty unstructured environment. I thrive in chaos. I thrive in pressure. I thrive in situations where I get to be creative and create something new. As soon as things get stagnant and scale, I think I start to be a worse worker. And so I was having a bit of an identity crisis. I was like, maybe I should leave so that they can fill this with someone who will do a better job. And then I opened my mouth and was honest about this to my manager. And luckily I have a manager who listens, and she started to recommend we do big projects like this documentary, blue ocean projects, if you will, to access my superpowers and to give me what I need out of my relationship with work. And so I changed my job. I'm no longer the person who churns out like these process marketing videos, because I'm just not built for it. I literally come in Mad Men style, and I'm like, here's a pitch for the next like big video for Q1, and like 50s with my like suspenders on. And I love that. And I never would have gotten to do that if I hadn't been honest and advocated authentically for what I need for my relationship with work. So I guess to answer your question in a very broad sense that someone might be able to take something out of this from, is you have the power to change your relationship with work through conversation. I used to think I was much more powerless, but instead they need you. They need you at work. And so they want you to be happy if it's a good company. If it's not, get the hell out of there. But you should understand that it is a two-way street, this relationship. And as long as you have good communication upward, you can expect that they hear you and do something downward. Otherwise, it's high time to leave.
What's your goals moving forward? Do you want to keep making content in this space? Do you see that continuing?
I really do. This is like a whole other topic, Dave, but I think that big content is on the rise. I think you see corporations buying media companies. I think you see people, like, how many companies have you seen write a book, a literal book, and then try to sell that as opposed to like this PDF, like best practices guide? I think big content's on the rise. And I think documentaries is just one example of big content. And I believe that there's really a home for this within corporations, not just within Netflix or Hollywood. I think corporations that are wise will notice that this adds value to the world, adds value to their brand, and people are going to care about it more than if you're just trying to shove a product in their face. So yeah, I like to think this is going to keep going, and I'm certainly going to keep going with it. I'm working on a documentary now.
Thank you for listening. It really means a lot to us. We want to hear from you as we keep growing. Please reach out on whyiquit.co with any feedback or if you have any guests that you think would be a good fit. Subscribe on whyiquit.substack.com to get an update every Wednesday with the newest guest. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube to get notified with the latest episodes. Also, a special thanks to Chris Dole for the music. Check out his newest album, Here's to You. Thank you, and we will be back next Wednesday.